The cold wind of the early morning carried the scent of smoke and iron across the hills. A silence heavier than death itself lay over the battlefield, a silence before the storm that would end an empire. Ravens circled the blood-colored sky as if waiting for their feast. Far below, the Roman legions stood in perfect formation, their shields gleaming faintly in the dawn light. Yet behind the armor, every man could feel it, the trembling heartbeat of a doomed world. In the distance, the horizon shimmered with motion. Thousands of barbarian warriors, Goths, Vandals and Huns, stretched as far as the eye could see, roaring like a rising sea. They beat their chests, struck their swords against shields, and sang songs of vengeance. To them, this day was not merely a battle, it was judgment. It was the end of centuries of Roman arrogance. General Flavius Severus sat upon his horse, staring into the grey mist. He had fought for Rome his entire life, from the deserts of Africa to the frozen lands beyond the Rhine. But never had he seen the empire so weak, so divided. Behind him, the city of Rome itself burned faintly on the horizon. Smoke curled upward from broken temples and shattered villas. The once mighty heart of civilization now beat weakly, surrounded by the roar of rebellion. "General," whispered Marcus, his young lieutenant, "shall we sound the horns?" Severus's hand tightened around his sword hilt. "Not yet," he muttered. "Let them come. Let them show their rage before they taste Roman steel." But even as he spoke, a strange unease crept into his bones. These were not the disciplined enemies he once faced. These were desperate men, and desperate men could not be predicted. Then came the sound, a horn, deep and thunderous from the barbarian line. The hills trembled as their hordes surged forward like an avalanche. Horses screamed, spears darkened the sky. The first wave crashed into the Roman shields, and the world exploded into chaos. The clang of iron, the cry of men, the spray of blood. It was a storm of death. Severus shouted orders, his voice lost in the roar. The Romans fought fiercely, blades flashing, shields shattering under the endless assault. But the tide was too great. For every barbarian that fell, two more rose behind him. A giant Goth, his face painted black with ash, swung his axe into a Roman line, splitting men like firewood. Arrows rained down from the ridge, cutting through armor, finding flesh. Horses stumbled on the dead, crushing the fallen beneath their hooves. Severus fought like a beast, his sword a blur of silver. He cut down a Hun rider, tore his spear from the ground, and hurled it through another's chest. But when he looked around, he saw only ruin. The once unbreakable Roman formation was collapsing. Discipline was gone. Fear had taken its place. "Fall back," he cried, "to the ridge, regroup." But no one listened. The ground shook as more barbarians flooded in. The standard of Rome, the Golden Eagle, fell into the mud. A Vandal warrior trampled it beneath his boot, laughing as he drove his blade through a Roman's throat. Marcus appeared beside the general, his face streaked with blood and ash. "General, we're surrounded. They've cut us off from the rear." Severus turned sharply and saw it was true. The enemy had circled behind them, sealing their fate. The Roman army, once the most feared in the world, was now a trapped animal, clawing for air. And then came the fire. The barbarians hurled flaming pitch into the Roman lines. Shields ignited, horses panicked. Men screamed as the flames devoured them. The smoke was thick and choking. It blotted out the sun. Through the haze, Severus could barely see. He stumbled, coughing, dragging Marcus toward a half-broken wall. The young soldier was bleeding from the leg, his armor torn. "Don't stop," Marcus gasped. "Rome needs us." Severus almost laughed, a bitter sound lost in the chaos. "Rome is gone," he said. "We're fighting for ashes now." But still he fought. Even as the flames consumed the fields, even as the screams rose like a black hymn to the gods, he refused to surrender. He struck down another enemy, then another, until his arms felt like stone. Then he saw her, a barbarian woman standing on the ridge, holding a banner made from torn Roman cloth. Her hair was wild, her eyes bright with fury. Around her stood the chieftains of the tribes, Alaric the Goth, Attila's riders, and countless others. They watched the empire's last defenders die with grim satisfaction. The woman raised her sword to the sky and shouted something in her tongue. The barbarians roared in response, and Severus understood this was not just victory. It was vengeance for centuries of Roman cruelty, slavery, and conquest. The world was changing, and Rome was the sacrifice. Hours passed, though it felt like days. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, the battle was over. The field was a sea of corpses, Roman and barbarian alike. Smoke rose from burning armor. Ravens tore at the dead. Severus lay on the ground, his armor cracked, blood pooling beneath him. He could hear faint cries, survivors being dragged away, looted, enslaved. He tried to lift his sword, but his hand trembled too much. "Marcus," he whispered. The young man lay beside him, motionless. His eyes stared at the sky, unblinking. Severus felt the last strength leave his body. He turned his gaze toward the distant city, Rome, once eternal, now burning. The marble domes, the columns, the temples, all swallowed by flame. He thought of the senators who had betrayed their people for gold, the emperors who had drowned the empire in vanity and blood. He thought of the slaves who had built its glory and died in silence. And he knew in that final moment that the empire had not fallen in one day. It had been dying for centuries. Today was merely its funeral. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of barbarian horns, echoing over the ruins. Severus smiled faintly, a sad, broken smile. "So this is how Rome ends," he murmured. "Not with glory, but with silence." As darkness closed around him, he saw a vision, or perhaps a memory. Rome as it once was, golden, alive, its streets filled with laughter and music. Children running between marble fountains, priests lighting torches before the gods, legions marching beneath banners that touched the clouds. Then the vision faded, replaced by fire and smoke. The world would remember the day differently, as a triumph for some, a tragedy for others. But for those who stood there amid the blood and ruin, it was something else entirely. It was the moment when history itself held its breath, the end of one age and the birth of another. When the barbarians finally entered the city, they found its streets empty, its people gone or hiding. Statues lay broken, temples desecrated. Yet in the ruins, they felt something strange. Not victory, but awe. Because even in death, Rome seemed immortal. Night fell over the smoking ruins. The moon rose high, pale and silent, over the ashes of an empire that had ruled the world. Somewhere, deep in the shadows, a single Roman soldier, wounded, nameless, lit a small torch and placed it before the fallen eagle. The flame flickered weakly, but it did not die. Perhaps it was hope, perhaps it was madness. But as the wind carried the last whisper of Latin prayers into the night, the world turned its page, and history, cruel, eternal, and merciless, wrote the final line. The day the Roman Empire fell, the world was reborn in fire.